Hi, my name is Keith Cooper from Northlight Images, and in this video I'm looking at making colour profiles to improve the print quality of a printer. In particular, this one is a Canon G550. It's a 6-ink tank printer. The G650 in the UK is the same version as this, but with a scanner on top. It's a G640, 620, 520, whatever. There are all kinds of number versions of this around the world, but they're all essentially the same printer inside. 6 dye-based inks: black, grey, cyan, magenta, yellow and red. And in making profiles for this and testing it, I found it's a very capable printer. It's a dye-based printer, so you're not making archival prints that will last hundreds of years, but it can make some good quality prints. Now, normally I don't look that much at small printers like this. I tend to look at much larger printers. But this one, I thought, we'll see what we can do with it, see what sort of quality we can get out of it, because a lot of people will dismiss printers like this. But it's economical and it's potentially a great way of getting into printing. And I'm just interested in photo printing. That does run somewhat to sort of fine art media, photos, photo media, and the odd greetings card, which it does quite well. Now, I've done quite a few other videos and will be doing a detailed review of this printer in due course. So there's lots of little bits of information I've put together for it. But in this instance, I'm looking at what is a serious problem with the printer. I use Apple Macs, and for some reason Canon have chosen to use the AirPrint driver for driving the printer from my Mac. Well, the AirPrint driver is great if you want to connect your phone up directly and do things like that, but from a quality point of view, if I said it was hopeless, well, I'd be exaggerating a bit, but AirPrint really is not something you want to see in printer specifications if you're interested in any quality of printing. Now, if you use Windows PC, you can create ICC profiles, and the driver allows you to use ICC profiles. Well, that's fine. This is what I'm going to be doing here, applicable to Windows users as well, since the profiles you can use will work on Windows systems. What I don't know for certain is the applicability of these profiles that I'm making on a Mac for Windows users. I've covered colour management elsewhere and profiling, the use of profiles, but I'm going to make correction profiles. Now, whether these are proper ICC profiles is another matter, because we don't know what's going on underneath in the AirPrint driver. It's a mystery, and good colour management and mysteries don't mix well together. Now, I'm going to look at a paper from PermaJet. This is Artist Watercolour 250, so it's a thickish watercolour paper, and I want to make a profile for it. Now, I happen to know that I can make profiles for this paper, and the reason I know that is because for my normal colour management work, I have an ISIS scanning spectrophotometer and some quite fancy software that I use, and I've made some profiles, and so I know that it works. However, if you wanted that lot, it would set you back nearly £5,000. Not really a practical option for most people. More reasonable is this. This is the ccStudio. It used to originally be the Colormunki, then it was the i1 Studio, but this is the ccStudio, which is the new version, and it's this little device here, which is a spectrophotometer. Now, it's much cheaper than buying all the kind of kit that I normally use for my professional work, but it works very well. Now, I have looked at using this with another printer as well, and I know that it makes very good profiles. So I'm going to go through here. I'm not going to concentrate too much on the mechanics of using the software. One, because it's quite easy to follow, and two, because I've covered it elsewhere and I've written at length about the device here and profiling on the Northlight Images website. For articles that require detail and technical information, I tend to do those preferably as written articles, whereas the videos are more of a an overview to give you an idea of what I'm doing. So hopefully the two together should help anyone who's concerned about making profiles and things you can do. I should mention also that this device can be used to calibrate your monitor. Now this is a BenQ monitor and it's hardware calibrated. Now I've set this up specifically because when I'm shooting videos this has a really low colour temperature. I've set it to 4000K, which you would never normally work at, but it means that I can shoot videos in the sort of lighting I've got, albeit on a partially sunny day the light is changing a little bit, but it does mean that what you see on the screen will look vaguely like how I see it as well. But I'm going to run this, I'm going to print some targets, I'm going to measure the targets, do the profiles, and then make some test prints to see how well it's worked. But anyway, the software. I fired this up. This is iOneStudio. The X-Rack products are in the process of being rebranded under the Calibrite name. They're the same things. So this one here says Calibrite Color Checker Studio. I have an X-Ray iOneStudio device and it's the same device inside. In fact, not much different from the original Colormunki device, which came out 2007, 2008. So it's been around a while and it's probably one of the best, cheaper methods of creating printer profiles. I'm going to say that most people probably don't need to make their own printer profiles, but this is the sort of device that would be an ideal purchase for a camera club or something like that, where several people can share it around, make a few profiles, and they can all benefit from better prints. And it can be used for calibrating the any club equipment as well, any screens or anything. But it's fairly simple. Select my workflow on it. I'm going to run through and I'm going to just click on color print. Now it does black and white as well, but I would say if you're interested in black and white, it's I'll call it a work in progress. I have looked at the black and white calibration options. It works on some printers, some media, others it's less than spectacular. So I'm going to just make a color profile here for this particular PermaJet paper. Let's see, it's a thickish watercolour paper, and you know, you'll probably find elsewhere in the world, you'll probably find thick, similar types of paper. So this one's 250 grams and it's A4. I don't normally work with A4 printers. These are office printers at this size for me. I much prefer much larger printers because I make huge prints, but we're not doing that this time. I'm looking at the G550 here. Anyway, here's the pattern. I'm going to have to print out a test pattern here, leave it to dry, measure it with this device. The software will take the measurements, it will analyse them and come up with a second set of patches to print out based on the measurements of the first ones. So the second set refines the profile created from the first set. Now 50 patches here, 50 patches in the second refining patch set doesn't sound a lot if you're used to colour management. In fact, results are quite good and have surprised me. Now, I'm going to say they're not a patch on my 5,000 quid's worth of kit that I use to do this professionally. But then, you know, it's 5,000 quid's worth of kit. What do you expect? You'd want to see some difference from it. The profiles I normally make when I'm testing printers and the ones I make available for non-commercial use, connected with the printer reviews, are usually made on the more expensive kit. Not only is it more expensive, it's actually much easier to use, but neither here nor there. Anyway, I need to print this. I've set the printer to Canon G550. Paper size I've set to A4. And we're going to do this and I'm going to print it. Now I could at this point create what's called a session, which allows me to print several first sheets, measure those, save the data and return to it, so that in the original software you had to start profiling, you had to do the whole process in one go, which meant that if you wanted to leave a print overnight to dry, you had to leave the software running. Now they fixed that a while ago, but it's covered in here. It's about making the sessions, but I'm just doing a single paper here. I'm going to print it. So I'm going to go for the print button here, and it comes up with the print driver. Now I'm going to use best quality for this, because I found on this printer that using the best quality, although it takes a few more minutes to print an image, actually does make a difference. I can see and produces better results. We have a question though of what media setting. There is no media setting for watercolour paper in here, and anyway this isn't a Canon paper. So I need to set up this printer, and I need to actually print it using a media setting. Which one will I pick? Well, I know from experimenting with the more expensive and much quicker kit to do it, that the fine art rough setting, which is the one I would initially expect, actually gives the best results here. Remember, I'm profiling the system as a whole. I'm not saying that these are going to be optimal ICC profiles. They are aimed at getting better prints out of a small and relatively inexpensive printer. They are not producing contract proofs, or I'm not looking for anything in particular accuracy here. So I'm going to pick on the media type. I've got quite a range of them I can pick from. I'm going to go to Premium Fine Art Rough. Now that's the one here. We'll set that. Now it turns out I've already produced some presets, and I would say if you're using a printer like this with different papers, store your print settings as presets. It stops them randomly changing due to something you've done or the weather or whatever, but store them as this. And I've got one here that I've got one that's PFA Rough Best. That's at the high quality setting. I've got a borderless one as well, but I don't need to print borderless here for these targets. Bordered is okay. So I'm just going to go for the Rough Best, and that's preset this to Premium Fine Art Rough, and the quality is set to best there. So we've got scale 100%. We've got everything there. I just need to print. The paper's quite a nice thick paper, so it's 250 grams. I'm going to load it into the back here, and it will ask me to set the paper type actually on the printer, and I'm going to do that. I just press OK. It is A4, so that's okay, but the paper was previously set to Photo Other, and I don't want Photo Other. It's set to FA Rough, and it's ready to print. The printer will do its normal whirry bits that printers do when you start them up and haven't used them for a short while. There we go. It never says what it's doing. Printers just make noises like that. You get used to it. So here we have everything set up here. I'll press print. Printer wakes up. It says printing. In goes the paper. I'm running this at the high quality settings, so it's going to take a few minutes to print. Here comes the print, and it looks fine. I've used the printer enough to know that it prints just fine on almost any paper I've put into it. It handles thick media like this. It has no trouble with putting several sheets of thick media like this. I've used it for printing greetings cards and stacked 4 or 5 of them in the back. So the paper feed is very good on the printer, but what I'm addressing here is its problems, and it's a choice Canon made in simplifying this. That in a way limits some of its usefulness. Now I'm saying you don't have to accept that limited usefulness, and there are ways of improving the results from the printer. So we'll see what the profile comes out like. one of the things always to notice, if you're unsure of media settings when you're doing prints like this, you may need to do 2 or 3 to be sure. But you can look at these coloured patches and get a magnifying glass out, and a loupe or a lens, a camera lens. I use a 50mm camera lens as a high power magnifier, and look to make sure there's no bleeding or inks running on the paper. That's a sign that your media settings are either incorrect, or you are trying a paper that is not terribly compatible with this printer. Now I have a glossy film paper that I've shown using another printer, that particular paper will not print properly with any Canon or Epson printer I have ever tested. It simply will not work. The paper is not compatible. I'm not saying you need to get Canon papers for a Canon printer, Epson papers, although I do suggest that when you're first starting out, get a pack of the manufacturer's paper, because in that way you can be sure that mistakes and problems you're seeing are not due to paper choice. You don't have to, in an ongoing situation, keep using original papers, but start out with it. But I've done quite a few things. I've got a video about how to make your paper choices, how to choose what papers you want. Now I'll look at this. There we go, 1 of 1. That looks very nice. There are no obvious problems there whatsoever. That just needs to dry. I'm going to say for a paper like this and these dye inks, I'd like to leave it at least 10-20 minutes. And some papers will benefit from being left longer, and where I'm making profiles for professional use, I actually leave the paper overnight to dry before I do the measurements. Now, with the software as it stands here now, I could do a first print of another paper, and save those as sessions on here so I can go back to and use it. But this one's printed, we'll leave that one to dry, and then I'll do the measurements. Right, well, this first print, let it dry for a while. I'm now going to do the measurements, and I'll just click next on here. And it tells me to calibrate the device. Now, the device will do some internal checks for consistency, and it will check things. You just have to rotate the wheel on the top. There we go, and that's that. Lets me do it, and I can calibrate it. It basically has a reflective target inside, so it produces a light, measures the reflection off the target, checks that it's what it thinks it should be, and then it will do a calibration. There we go, device is calibrated. I can now set it to make measurements. And there's a little window at the bottom of the device, which is where it makes its measurement, and I need to point the bar there down towards that little window. We're now ready. I would say use a better setup than this. Obviously I've got this set up just for shooting the videos. Normally I would have this on a bigger desk. I would have more space, and you want ease of movement. Now this particular paper is quite thick, but still I don't really want to measure the colour of the desk underneath. So I'm going to take just a pack of other paper. Take that has a sheet of cardboard in it. I'm going to put that under there just to improve the quality of the measurements. Depends on the paper. Thicker papers, less so, but a thin paper, the light from this would go through the paper, bounce off the wood here and back, so you're getting what you're profiling is a mixture of ink, paper and wood, which is never going to yield particularly good results. But anyway, all I need to do is put this at the start of the strip, hold it like that. I'm just going to, you can follow the instructions here, it tells you which one to do, and there's a number 1 written on it here, so I can just do that, and press that, and take it across and let go, and it's accepted the measurements. You can see that because the measuring bar moves across on there. So I just go to the second one, press, slide across, stop, and it's measured that. Let's do the third one. There we go. Fourth one. And the last one. There we go. I measured the target. I measured all 50 patches. And that's done. There is a sound as well, but I've got the sound turned down on the computer, so just here, you probably won't pick it up. There's a slight pinging sound to tell you that it's read it correctly. We've done that. I can put this back over here, and I can click on next, which I think is probably going to do some calculations. Let's have a look. There we go. It's doing its stuff. And the little wheel goes round, and at a certain point it will create a second test chart for me. Well, there we are. It's generated its second test chart. Now I'm going to have to print this, let it dry, measure it again as before. But you notice the colours are subtly different. They are tones which the software has identified where it needs more data to produce a profile. So once again, I'm going to print that. Let's move the printer back across. One nice bit about testing little printers like this is how easy they are to move about. Some of the printers I test take 2 or 3 people to move. We'll load that in there. Okay, it is still set for fine art rough from before, so okay that. There we go, it's ready to print. Print. The print settings are the same as before. Do check just to make sure. They shouldn't have changed, but you lose nothing by checking just to make sure. Premium Fine Art Rough Best, yeah, it's set at the same preset I used before. And now we'll print that second sheet. Now I had 3 or 4 sheets of that thickish paper loaded in, and it's had no problem whatsoever. It's just loaded in. Very good paper feed on these little printers. Something I'd like to see on some of the bigger printers I look at sometimes. So paper feeding is one area where you have to be a little bit careful with some of these higher quality papers. No problem at all here, as I printed cards and the likes, had no real problem at all. But anyway, we'll just wait for this to print, and then we've got to wait for it to dry. Notice the colours coming out here are softer, more muted colours. They look more like refining colours for skin tones and the like. Now, that's not greatly important for me because I'm an architectural photographer, industrial photographer, and you couldn't pay me 5 times my day rate to photograph weddings. But there are the original colours, and there are the second lot of colours which are going to be measured and will produce a profile. Anyway, I have to leave these to dry, much as I did for that one there, so we'll come back to that in a minute. Well, here's the second sheet for me to measure. Once again, measuring it on the sheet of card. About there, the software, I just go to click next on that, and it goes through the same sequence as before for making the measurements. So I need that to do the 5 strips. Doesn't need recalibrating because I haven't switched things off or done anything like that, so it's okay for that. So position that there, press button, slide. There we go. And the last one. There we go. It's done it. So we've got all the data, second set down there. It shows you on the screen, it actually displays what it expected and what it measured. And you can't get any extra detail from this. If you use one of the packages like i1 Profiler, which meant for more professional use, you can get all kinds of measurement data out of it. But this is not aimed at that. So you can use, if you're interested in going a lot further in colour management, you can use this device with Argyle CMS, which is a free system to use. It is quite complex to learn and requires a lot of knowledge to use well, but it's free and it works well with the device here which supported it. But that's really quite a specialised thing. One of the reasons I've never actually done any specific reviews of it is that it is just so complex to use correctly. It's potentially very good, but I've got X-Rite's i1 Profiler software, which works really well, does everything I need. So there you go. But we've done that. I'll just click on next. It says to give the profile a name. Now I've given the profile a meaningful name so that when I come to use it, I'll know what settings I used. So it's called G550, which is the printer. Then it says PJ, PermaJet, people who made the paper. WC250, that tells me which paper it is, which is the Watercolour 250. And then I've underscore FAR, which is Fine Art Rough, so that's the paper media setting. And then I've got underscore best, and that tells me what setting it was made at. Making profiles and putting random names on them and then coming back to them 6 months is a recipe for disaster. You will not remember what they are. So take time to come up with a meaningful way of describing the names of the profiles, because if you do many papers and that, you'll end up with loads of profiles with maybe different settings and that. Prune them, get rid of the ones you don't use, but you'll still have a list of optional profiles to use. So I really ought to mention on this one that it's made for a Mac. Because the G550, but all my profiles are made for Macs because we don't have any PCs here, so I won't particularly bother with that. But if you have one of my profiles to test, remember where they were made if they don't work on a Windows machine. They may work, I don't know, I've not tested it. But anyway, we've got that. I'll go through that, save profile, and it will now, we get a little display down here, it will now go through and actually make a profile. Once I've made the profile, I'm going to do a couple of test prints. One using the default settings from the printer, that's the printer driver managing colour, and one the same but with my profile applied. And I hope my profile will look better. There we go, profile's been made. Okay, I can now quit this. One thing I would say, if you make profiles and you're going to be printing from a particular application, restart the application after you've made new profiles. A lot of applications such as Photoshop only read in the available profiles when they're first opened up. So if you create a new profile whilst you've got Photoshop open in the background, you'll go to print from Photoshop and your new profile won't be there. So you will have to restart when you add profiles. Goes for anything on Windows and Macs. When you add profiles, restart any applications that may use them. Or restart machine if you like, or leave it whenever you do it, but they won't immediately be recognised. Right, I've loaded up a test image into Photoshop. This is one that's available for download from the Northlight Images website, along with a load of others. And I'm printing it from inside Photoshop. That's an oldish version of Photoshop, but then it's an oldish Mac I'm running this on. It's a CS6. The dialogue will be slightly different in different versions, but the same thing is happening here. Essentially, I've set colour management to Photoshop manages colours. I've specified the printer profile that we've just created. I'm printing, normally I'm using the relative colorimetric rendering intent, but I have selected BPC or black point compensation. That makes a difference with shadows and blacks, particularly on art papers like this, and makes a decided difference when you're using the profiles. So we've got that set there. I've set it scale to fit media, It's quite high resolution, so I'm just going to print that. Well, after a minute or so of assorted whirrings and whatever, printing has started. Well, here comes the print made with the profile I've just created, and a quick glance at some of the colours suggests nothing is seriously wrong. It looks okay. Comparing prints is a tricky thing to do. You ideally need consistent lighting. There are lots of things that can go wrong, and one of the very worst ways of checking a print is to assume that the screen is the same thing as the print and hold the print up to the screen to look at it. That invariably doesn't work. First of all, there's different colour temperatures. We've got lighting in here, LED halogen replacement bulbs with a bit of daylight. It's now cloudy light coming in here. It was sort of sunny when I did earlier, so pictures will look different. What I would say when you're comparing prints, look at them as well as under consistent lighting. Set up a light for checking the prints, but also look at them under the lighting where you're going to show the prints. So if you're going to put the prints on a wall, see what they look like at the lighting levels you're going to show them at, because the shadow detail of prints and various other aspects of print changes depending on the amount of light shining on them. So I can take a poorer print, show it in bright lighting, then take a better quality print, show it in dim lighting, and the poorer quality print, by any objective measure, looks better under the bright lighting than the really good print under dim lighting. So don't be too discouraged when checking things if immediately stuff doesn't look spot on. And as I say, don't compare your screen directly with your print. They're two different things. Now, I've done lots of articles about printing, about the generic aspects of printing for any printer, not just this one, for all different types of printers. So have a look at that if you're interested in getting the best results. This test is strictly to see about how well profile made with the ccStudio here improves things on this particular printer. Now, I know profiles work. I just want to see how well they work on this printer with its rather poorly colour management. I can't test this on a PC, but we shall see. Now, a quick look. There's nothing wrong. There's no banding. There's nothing. The black and white looks quite good. Skin tones. Now, in this particular image, the yellow here is quite a strong yellow light. So what you don't want is the lady in the top here going towards orange or red. It is a yellow, it is an evening light. Look at the girl in the picture in the corner for more natural skin tones. There's darker skin tones here and obviously black and whites. But there's nothing obviously wrong with that one. I'm going to now print a second image, but this time with Printer Manager's colour. This is just using the driver, no profile, no nothing. This is just saying, go on printer, do your best. And we'll see what comes out. Print comes up with the print dialog, fine art, rough. We're going to print it at the same media settings. We're just not going to worry about colour management. And off it goes. And now I just need to wait for the second print to come. I'd say, much as I had to wait for the target prints to dry, I need to, much quicker that time, I need to wait for the prints to dry to compare them. Because on heavy papers like this, shadow details can change. It really, if you've not tried it and you print on a thick paper like this and you make several prints, compare one that's straight out of the printer with one that's been resting for half an hour or so, and you will often see subtle differences in the way where the ink is dried and the tonality has changed just a little bit. But anyway, we shall see what this one does. Even as the print comes out, I can see some differences between the two, quite obvious ones in terms of colour, in that the colours are much more vibrant on the one made with the profile applied. The colours are pretty much correct on this one. I know this test image, I've printed it a lot. I've probably printed this image thousands of times on different printers, different papers. So the familiarity lets me tell immediately when it's okay and when something's not quite right. And you're not going to get huge differences here, because for there to be a huge difference, the basic printing setup using the printer driver, the AirPrint driver in this case, with it on the Mac here, would be broken. Now, it isn't, it prints. Many people get what they regard as acceptable prints using it. I think it can do better, and that's why I produced this profile here, particularly for third-party papers like this, where you may not be able to get a profile for it. Now, I know that PermaJet, one of the companies in the UK, that if you buy paper off them, they will make profiles for you. There are companies all over the place that will do this. And so here we have two prints. Now, bearing in mind what I said about waiting for it to dry before saying too much, my immediate concerns are that the black and white section has, I'll try and get a photograph of this as well to show the effect, but it is quite tricky to show the effect in a photo, but I'll try and make it a bit easier. First up, black and white. This has a slight magenta tint to it. That comes as no great surprise to me, because I've discovered this with other printing with this. You tend to get a slight magenta print in black and white, which is generally fixed with profiles. The colours are much more vivid in the profiled version. The black and white is better. The greens, for example, much more intense and vivid greens in it. Skin tones, not much difference in it. The colours are a bit washed out on that. Now, bear in mind, this is not the fine art rough paper that the printer is expecting. It's been set to fine art rough here, it's been set to fine art rough in the driver. I would expect some differences in it, but in general the colour is much better here. Where there are strong colours in this test image, they come through better. In terms of deep shadow detail, with the guy holding the double base here, that is clear in both of them, but there is more colour in this one here. So if you gave me these two and said which would you look at, it would take me a fraction of a second to go, this one looks better. That's the difference you get. Now we'll leave. I'll take a photo of it when it's dried a bit and lighted a bit better. So there you go. That is PermaJet Artist Watercolour 250 paper used on a Canon G550 with a custom profile made using ccStudio. You can still find these. This is the old, originally Colormunki, and before that it was, and after that it was the i1 Studio. So that's how easy it is to make a profile and make a better looking print using a third-party paper with these dye inks. Now, hope that's been of use. I've got lots of other stuff about colour management and printers. This printer, other printers, looking at them, also discussing different aspects, general aspects of printing. So please feel free to ask questions, and if you find this interesting, please subscribe to the channel as well. But thank you very much.